What's going on, everybody? This is Hijack Homage and you're watching SummerFridge. This is a crossover, like a what if video. What if when Bruce Wayne's parents was killed, that SCP-662 stepped in to raise him instead of Alfred Pennyworth? Now, I wanted to do this because the Batman is one of my favorite superheroes, and also the SCP world is so intriguing and mysterious that I thought it would be an entertaining concept for me and hopefully for whoever listening as well. If you end up enjoying this type of matchup, then let me know and I'll do the inverse of this crossover. Like, what if Batman was in the SCP world? Like, what if Bruce's parents were killed by a mysterious SCP and how his life would have turned out? So if you want to eventually see this scenario come to light, hit that like button and subscribe. Alright, let's get into it. Let's establish, for the most part, what would have been kept the same in this what if. And that his childhood, such as Bruce Wayne being born to a wealthy physician, Dr. Thomas Wayne, and his wife Martha, who were themselves members of the prestigious Wayne and King's family of Gotham City, respectively. As he grew older, his family's reputation made Bruce restless, and he began sneaking out of school to visit Gotham City, where he wouldn't be so easily recognized. On one such outing, when he was 10 years old, he was picked up by an officer, Jim Gordon, and his partner on the patrol, en route back to the station. Bruce witnessed Jim accepting a trench coat as a bribe for a tailor, though neither realized it was a bribe at the time. But Bruce will remember it as an indicator of Jim's character. Let's go back to the day that changed his life forever. The night the Waynes went to see the Mark of Zorro at the Monarch Theater. It's nighttime, and a trio are walking through the back street of Gotham. The Waynes are not alone. Behind them is a stranger looking to score some money. The man attempted to rob them at gunpoint and panicked, shooting both Thomas and Martha dead. And this is where I changed the story a little, because personally, I believe that another person should have been there as well. Alfred Pennyworth. I never did understood why he wasn't there. I mean, Alfred Pennyworth is depicted as loyal, an ex-special operation executive operative of honor and ethics, with a connection within the intelligence community, having morality, strength, and determination, as they were all the gifts from the man whose wisdom and courage never failed. Monarch Theater is in Crime Alley, which is located in Gotham City, near Gotham Square, where obviously crime is expected. So while Alfred wasn't there as a chauffeur / ex-special operation executive operative, ready to pick up and drop off the Waynes as they travel through Gotham City and defend them if an issue comes about. So in this what if, I'm going to add him to the scene. Alfred hears the shot down the alley and rushes to the scene, knowing this was where the Waynes were supposed to be picked up after the show. He then sees the shooter pointing a gun at Bruce, as Bruce is standing by the body of his parents afraid. Alfred dashes and tackles the shooter, and a struggle over the gun proceeds. In the process of the tussle, the gun goes off and grazes Bruce in the arm. Alfred sees this, and this was all the shooter needed to create an opening during the tug of war over the gun. Alfred instinctively rushes to the young Bruce, who is now in shock. He's attempting to pick up the child to take him to safety, but is interrupted as 2 shots rang out. In the hospital, Alfred laying on the hospital bed. He's been shot, and he's looking like he's not going to make it. Tubes in and out his mouth as he's hooked up to machine and doctors in and out the room. Yeah, it's not looking too good for Alfred. Bruce is taken to the room, and somehow Alfred has gotten the message across that he wants to see Bruce. Bruce sees Alfred. Bruce knows deep down that he's about to lose another person he loves today. Alfred signals Bruce to grab a pen and paper, for he has something he wants to say. Bruce does it, and Alfred begins to write. Though he's in pain, he pushes through it. He hands the piece of paper to Bruce. Just as Bruce takes the paper, Alfred's hands go slump, and a flat line can be heard, drowning out the sound of any and everything around. Bruce Wayne is now an orphan. But before I continue, I want to explain what Alfred meant to Bruce and in general. to establish the famous relationship we all know with Bruce and Alfred. So you'll see why his life would be so emphasized and different in this What If. People are familiar with Bruce Wayne and the fact that Alfred Pennyworth is his butler, but there are plenty of things about their relationship that most are totally unaware of. Keeping in mind, Alfred is the only person in the entire universe that knows everything about Bruce Wayne and Batman. He raised Bruce. We see this all the time in psychology when talking about learned behavior between parents and guardians to their children. Alfred is a war veteran, extremely wise, intelligent, and morally sound. Of course, he'll do his best to hand down these qualities to Bruce as such a vital part of his personality development stages. I think those three characters, along with the others like Superman, Alfred, do act on moral compass to a certain extent. I personally feel like Batman's moral and motivation are concreted and rarely in jeopardy. But more importantly, I think they give Bruce the strength to keep going, constantly keeping his faith in humanity strong. Considering all the things he's faced, it's a miracle he hasn't given up. From criminals constantly escaping Arkham to losing a Robin, and considering it's the biggest failure he's ever had, he faced enough to make a sane person quit. Bruce had a far different way of honoring his parents in mind, and when he adopted the cowl, Alfred came along for the ride, tirelessly guarding his employer's secret while providing some much needed assistance. Whether it's skilled technical support, medical aid, or simply managing the complicated schedule that comes along with being a business leader, nighttime vigilante, and wealthy playboy, it's all under the purview of Mr. Pennyworth. Driven by love and an unwavering sense of loyalty, Alfred nevertheless worries deeply about Bruce. He understands the importance of Batman to the city, such as Gotham. But after a lifetime of raising Bruce, he still sees a young, scared boy where most would see a hardened hero. And every night the bat signal flashes across the city skyline is another night that the boy would spend searching for a way to undo something that could never be undone. A search that Alfred realized could very well lead to his end. But in this What If, Alfred is not around. And along with that, we had to take away any morality, sound moral compass he would have been taught if Alfred was still alive to embed it in Bruce. So, from this point on, we're dealing with an immoral, unethical, unprincipled, and dishonorable Bruce Wayne. He's also dealing with seeing a triple murder of 3 people who he loved and knew all of his life. Okay, back to the story. Bruce is at his mansion. He reads the letter which sent him on a search to find something called the butler's handbell, which Alfred wanted him to locate before he died. Bruce locates it under a loose floorboard under Alfred's bed. It's a small silver handbell, 4 centimeters tall and 2 centimeters in circumference. The bell is missing its ringer. Within the inside of the bell, an inscription has been etched into the silver, reading, "Forever mine, SJW." Bruce is confused on why Alfred's last words would be to look for this ringless bell that he kept hitting. Bruce sits on the bed and gives it a shake, expecting to figure this mystery out, but something happens. When the bell is shaken, as if to ring it, a soft chime can be heard, although this does not come from the bell. A short, well-dressed Caucasian butler of self-proclaimed British heritage, calling himself Mr. Deeds, had appeared from the nearest area not within the line of sight, usually from around the corner. Bruce is confused and wants to know what's going on. Mr. Deeds explains everything to Bruce. Long story short, Mr. Deeds will do just about anything of the ringer. Ask what it is they desire and he'll carry it out. His knowledge of individuals' last name and titles is a mystery. The most reasonable requests given to Mr. Deeds will result in satisfaction. Bruce wants to test the limits of what he can do. For running tests, Bruce discovers that Mr. D is unable to produce very complex items, such as cars, luxury homes, or personal jets. If he's allowed to leave the line of sight in return, he's able to produce smaller, less complex items, such as a ham sandwich, a glass of iced tea, or even more luxurious items like caviar or a brick of gold. Mr. Deeds will perform tasks such as washing vehicles, preparing food, and cleaning bathrooms. If a request is deemed unreasonable or impossible by the butler, he would kindly tell the ringer so, and offers an alternative if one may be had. Bruce can summon Mr. Deeds from anywhere. He has immortality, teleportation, psychometry. If told to do a specific task, he'll gain the knowledge needed to accomplish it, or the knowledge that he cannot accomplish it. This includes tasks like assassination and theft, regeneration, and can disable technology from a distance even if he's unaware of it. Bruce figures this was most likely a failsafe for him. If anything was to happen to his parents, Alfred would be the guardian and raise them, but what if something happened to his parents and the guardian, leaving him alone before the age of 18? It seems like this bell is the answer to that question. Then a knock is heard at the door. It's Officer Jim Gordon. He's checking on young Bruce and how he's dealing with everything. He's wondering if he had made any contact to any close kin to come look after him. Bruce explains to Gordon that he has someone to look over him. Mr. Deeds makes himself known. Gordon was surprised as he thought the butler had also been shot and died, but it makes sense that a wealthy family like the Waynes would have more than one butler or help. Gordon tells Bruce if he ever needs anything to reach out and let him know. As Gordon leaves, he also promised to bring the killer to justice, but Bruce has something else in mind. Bruce wants to know who killed his parents and Alfred. This person doesn't deserve to be locked up or even alive. I believe Mr. Deeds will have the innate knowledge of accomplishing a task of not just finding someone, ending them as well. And Bruce knows this as well. I imagine Bruce telling Mr. Deeds to find and kill the murderer. Mr. Deeds will leave the room. Moments will pass. Then he'll return into the room. Mr. Deeds will relay the message as he stands bloody, that the murderer was named Joe Chill and he has been dealt with. Bruce doesn't want to stop just there. There's more people in this city that are just like Joe Chill, and they must be dealt with, so no other person will have to bear the pain that's eating him up from inside. And this is where the absence of Alfred starts to reveal itself, because we know Alfred took in Bruce Wayne when the little boy was orphaned after his parents was mercilessly murdered. Many remember him as the loyal butler who looked after the Wayne mansion and served his master breakfast, but he was so much more than that. Bruce Wayne got his first valuable lessons from his guardian. His morality, strength, determination were all gifts from the man whose wisdom and courage never failed. Alfred cared for Bruce and showed him what he could be, right from teaching him how to fight bullies and motivating him in his toughness. Let's be honest, Batman probably wouldn't be able to function without Alfred's support. Alfred is essential to Batman's existence and functioning, more so than any other character. His rogue gallery has sidekicks, his love interests, etc. Alfred was Bruce's caretaker, doctor, surgeon, cook, PR, and most importantly, family. The one thing that Bruce needs the most is a family. After the loss of his parents, Alfred was the one who brought him up like a son. Though Gordon also is close to him, he is not aware of the dual identity. Without the presence of a proper guiding conscience at such a young and personal age, Bruce, given his immense resources, would have, like any reckless, emotional child, given into the lure of drugs and go along with the path of self-destruction. And the legend we have come to know as Batman would probably never have existed. Bruce would have most likely became a psychopath, which is defined as a mental, antisocial disorder in which an individual manifests a moral and antisocial behavior, showing a lack of ability to love or establish meaningful personal relationships, and demonstrates a failure to learn from experience and other behaviors associated. Psychopaths are more cold-hearted and calculating. They carefully plot their moves and use aggression in a planned-out way to get what they want. And we'll start to see this as Bruce uses Mr. Deeds as a weapon and starts cleaning his city by ridding the filth one criminal at a time. This whole crusade on crime would closely play out like the Death Note, as Bruce being Light and Mr. Deeds being used like the Death Note. But what's different between Light's and Bruce's way of handling crime is that Light making everyone know what's behind it. It's his whole point. Light is not simply getting rid of bad people. His intention is to scare other bad people off and reassure good people that evil is being punished. Bad people dying in a freak accident isn't going to have the God of Justice effect. People have to die uniformly via heart attacks, so people understand that it's a larger movement, not a series of coincidences. He wanted everyone to know that there was someone doing it, that someone was making justice. Bruce will figure out quickly and seriously consider the possibility of being apprehended. He'll make the deaths look like unfortunate events and circumstantial deaths such as food poisoning, car accidents, drowning. Also, as long as the police doesn't have any physical evidence of him actually committing the murders, guarantees assurance, which is highly possible due to Mr. D's carrying out the orders and not Bruce himself. The patterns on how he killed will also be different. Getting the information of someone would be easy. The newspaper or even the internet could be a good source of information, but the pattern has to be erratic. Bruce and Mr. D's could go further if the patterns and how they kill are extremely different for every death. In this dark, chaotic, bleak city called Gotham, which is undoubtedly one of the most dangerous cities due to the crime and evil villains and hopelessness, the fact that crime will be dropping will become noticeable. Every sector of Gotham seems to be corrupted, from its government to its law enforcement, and they will have all been targets. Plenty of cops are on the payroll of various crime family and supervillains such as Falcone, Fish Mooney, Hugo Strange, Victor Zsasz, and the Mad Hatter. Mr. D's would have gotten rid of most of them, if not all, with a side of high-ranking people like a president or CEO of a company on the side. Over the years, a myth would slowly form, a shadowy and mysterious figure who looks to be a butler with an English accent would start to spread as rumors amongst the criminal underworld, from the lips of those who had escaped or seen him in action on camera. Yes, Gotham is now seeing better days, but if there is someone out there that are taking the law in their own hands, that they cannot go unchecked. No man is above the law. Villains like Mr. Freeze, the Penguin, the Dollmaker, the Riddler, Poison Ivy, Clayface, Harvey Dent would have still been a thing, but would have shortly been dealt with. And who is better to tackle this case than Detective Gordon? He has the hero's deep commitment of ridding the dark and corrupting city of crime. James Gordon is proficient in all aspects of criminal detective work and police procedural matters. He also has a keen instinct in regarding to the political aspect of managing the Gotham City Police Department. He has also shown remarkable strength of will and an ability to maintain his mental fortitude and sanity. Will he figure out who's the butler? Most likely. What would Bruce do when he discovers this? Probably kill him. Bruce has been untouchable this whole time, and now he's facing the only person who could and did draw a connection to him and this crime. So because of this, Jim Gordon is in the way of Bruce cleaning the city. So Gordon has to go. So how does this end? He seems impossible to stop dealing with either the legal or illegal way. He has the smarts, the means, and the immortal weapon. Where does he go from here? Well, surprisingly not too far, because there's a little something called the Justice League, who's been tracking this strange case that's been going on in Gotham. Oh, and believe me, there will still be a Justice League of some sort. Due to the story being so contained, a lot of the other heroes' origins will still happen as they should. Superman landing in Smallville, Wonder Woman existed many years before the story, The Flash getting struck by lightning, Cyborg and his accident, any Green Lantern on Earth getting their ring, Aquaman being born the bridge for the land and the sea, etc. The Justice League will put an end to Mr. D's and taking Bruce Wayne to Arkham Asylum, as it serves as a psychiatric hospital for the Gotham City area, housing patients who are criminally insane, making him a high-profile patient. And with that, guys, that's what I believe what would happen if Bruce Wayne had SCP-662. This was fun to talk about, and if you have anything to add, then leave a comment. And remember, if you ended up enjoying this type of matchup, then let me know. I'll do the inverse of this crossover, like what if Batman was in the SCP world. So if you want to eventually see this scenario come to light, hit that like and subscribe button. This is Hijack Homage, and you're watching SummerFridge. Thanks for watching. See ya.